So while I was baptized Episcopalian, my mother is a Roman Catholic, and my father is a Baptist. Yes, I know. And so if you're thinking that I might have been raised with some notion of what sin was and sinfulness, you would be right to assume that I was very acutely aware of what sin was, especially my own sin. It comes out in weird ways now that I'm an adult. I was on the phone with a friend of mine recently, and he had just come through this very difficult project at work, and against all odds, he had helped this project through. And so he called me and said, "I'm just so proud of what I've done. You know, I put so much work into it, and I can't believe it. I'm just so proud to have done this." And I, being a good friend, should have said, "Well, good for you. I know how much work you put into this. You must be so relieved. I'm just glad that I get to be friends with someone who is as great as you." But no, when he said I was so proud to have done this, I said back to him, "Pride is a sin." Because that's apparently who I've grown up to be. And, I immediately heard what I had said, and I walked it back, and I said all the good friend things that you're supposed to say. But I don't think I'm the only one who has trouble with this notion of biblical pridefulness, and then the pridefulness we kind of talk about day to day. Because the way we use the word pride and proud in our kind of regular language doesn't really jive with the biblical notion of pride. We use the word a lot to describe something other than the sin. Like we want our parents to be proud of us, right? We want to be proud of our children. There's that bumper sticker that says, "Proud to be an American." I was born on a farm, so I have country pride. And then the long laundry list of you're supposed to take pride in your appearance, take pride in your work, take pride in your home, take pride in your church, and on and on and on. So it sounds like pride is a virtue that we're supposed to attain, through very careful attention. So, what is the biblical notion of pride that is at odds with this kind of colloquial notion of pride? We get a great thesis statement from our first reading this morning. The beginning of human pride is to forsake the Lord. Beginning of human pride is to forsake the Lord. And the second line is one of my very favorites. The heart has withdrawn from its master. That's how they talk about pride. The heart has withdrawn from its maker. And the third one, for the beginning of pride is sin. I know a lot of people switch that line around too. The beginning of sin is pride, because pride is the gateway sin, right? Pride is the sin which enables you to sin again in other ways. And this is biblical, too. We see in the story of Adam and Eve, they want to take the apple from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because then they will know the difference between good and evil, and they can decide for themselves. They won't need God. They withdraw their heart from their Maker. Right? Too, the Tower of Babel. They were building a tower that would break through the floor of heaven, and then they would live in heaven. And they could be gods. They wouldn't need anyone else to tell them what to do. And also, in this, we've got that great line, pride was not created for human beings. And this idea also comes back again and again, that human beings have no right to be prideful. Paul tells us that too. We can boast of nothing except God and Christ. Right? We have nothing to be proud of. And when I hear that line, I want to bow my head and tuck my tail, run into a corner, and just cower in shame. Because I think our culture has decided that you can either be prideful or you can be ashamed. Those are our two choices. That the opposite of pride is shame. And if you have to choose, shame helps no one, right? So you might as well be prideful, because pride at least helps yourself. At least if you're prideful, someone's getting helped, right? An example of why I think this is a false choice and a false dichotomy, because I don't think shame is the opposite of pride. I can elucidate this for you. So let's assume that next semester at seminary, I write a good paper, right? And let's say that the professor says, "What a good paper that was. I think this should be published." She sends it to a publisher, and the publisher says, "You know, I think this thesis statement could be expanded into a book," and they give me a book deal, right? Now, I could take the prideful response to that and say, "Yes, I did that. I wrote that paper. It's because of me that that exists. I'm going to be published. I'm going to post that up on Facebook and collect all the likes, right? I'm going to celebrate me." But if you start to walk back from that place of pride, you might find yourself saying, "Well, you know, it wouldn't have been such a good paper anyway if I hadn't had a friend who would help me edit that down, because it did ramble a little bit. And then I wouldn't have been able to write such a good paper in the first place because I have such a good professor. Without her, I wouldn't have understood the topic well enough to have actually contributed to it. And then I wouldn't be at seminary anyway if they weren't helping me with room and board and tuition. And then I wouldn't have even gone to seminary if I didn't have friends and family in my life who were able to affirm my call to the priesthood and help me make that major life change. And then I don't think I would have heard the call to the priesthood if I didn't have such a strong church life in college that helped me turn my child's faith into an adult faith. And then I don't think I would have attended church in college if I didn't have parents who taught me that going to church was important. Worshiping God was important. It was important to say thank you. And so as you walk back from the place of pride, you start to realize that you are standing at that moment at an apex of a pyramid that is not of your own design and not of your own construction, that is peopled by friends and family and strangers who have led you to that place. And you haven't been canoeing furiously up a river by yourself against the current. You have been steering a sailing ship with the wind in your sails. You're not doing it all alone. And not only that, you realize that everything within that structure relies on the foundation of God's grace, that any of us only exist because of God. And creation itself only exists because of God. And while we get creative choices in our lives of where we go and what we do with our free will, we don't get any choice as to whether or not we exist. That is just grace. And that's what they mean when they say, we have nothing to brag about. Because when you stand in awe and gratitude, seeing that system pulled back, what can you brag about? You can just say thank you. Right? All you can say is just thank you. So you've seen, we walked to the opposite end of the spectrum from pride. And it's not shame. We have not come to a place of shame. We have come to a place of gratitude, of awe. That is the place of humility. Because humility is the opposite of pride, not shame. It's humility as the opposite of pride. So when my friend called me and he was so grateful and relieved that he had finally pushed this project through against all odds, he was celebrating, and he wanted to celebrate with me. It wasn't coming from a place of pride. Right? And celebrating is very important in our lives. We have to celebrate what we've done. But if you try and celebrate from a place of pride, all you're doing is celebrating yourself. Right? If you throw it up on Facebook and collect all the likes, you are just asking everyone else to celebrate you. And that is not what we're called to be as Christians. We're called to live from a place of gratitude, live in a place of humility. When you actually get to celebrate your accomplishments with your community, that's such a healthy thing to get to share with everyone, right? You're celebrating our shared life together instead of just you personally, right? So in your prayers this week, I want you to try this exercise. Take something that you're proud of recently, some accomplishment, and try walking it back. Walk it back to that place of gratitude and humility. Because that is the place where we bring our hearts back to our Maker. That is where we share communion with God in our prayer.